Welcome to Prison Professor. I am Michael Santos, and I'm here today with my friend George Manlove. George is an individual that I've been working with for the past couple of weeks, and I've learned an awful lot from him. But I asked him if he would share his story with us because I know a lot of other people would like to learn his story. George, why don't you tell us a little bit about the highlights of your career?
Thank you, Michael. I appreciate this opportunity to share. There's a couple highlights in my career. Right out of college, I was fortunate to become an intern for Apple Computer back in the early 80s and was part of that Macintosh launch team. And so that to me brings back great fond memories, and I love the tech industry. So moving on, I went to work for a family business, moved from Seattle back to my home state, and went to work for a family business. And at the time when I was joined the company, it was about $1 million in sales. And over time, over my 28-year career, I was instrumental in helping grow that company to 150 million approximately in annual revenues with significant profits.
So you are the epitome of the establishment, somebody that we would have looked to as a leader. I'm sure that many people in your industry looked at you as a leader. And yet, unfortunately, there came a time in your journey where other people in the government started to look at you as a target. Tell us a little bit about how it felt when you first learned that you were the target of a criminal investigation.
Well, I was taken back when I first found out that I was a potential person of interest, so to speak. But it was a result of a bankruptcy that the company filed after I had left. And one morning I got a subpoena on my doorstep from Federal Express, and I thought, what the heck is a subpoena, and why am I getting a subpoena? And one thing led to another.
I want to say something right there because you spoke about getting a subpoena. And a guy like you who's in business, you're probably used to finding battles with regard to civil actions and court documents. But this time, that subpoena put you on a different path. What did it feel like, or what steps could you take, or how do you feel your background prepared you to get a subpoena that could lead you into the criminal justice system?
My background did not prepare me for a subpoena that was in my name, for sure, and never in my wildest imagination did I feel that I would ever become crosshairs with the United States government.
Yeah, and it's so sad because our nation's prison system now is, of course, the biggest on the planet. And a lot of times prosecutors are looking at people like you as trophies. And instead of pursuing justice, they're looking for a conviction. Tell us about what steps you took to prepare yourself for this journey once you got that subpoena.
Well, at that time we had counsel on board this was a civil case, by the way.
Okay, so the subpoena was actually a civil case.
For the civil case, yes. I was involved in a civil case and then subsequently a criminal case. There was a criminal referral from the civil case. So I got to experience both civil and criminal. Fortunately enough, our board and myself had the foresight to have a large insurance policy for directors and officers insurance and fiduciary responsibility insurance. And on one hand, it was good and that we had plenty of coverage and the insurance company was willing to support us. But on the other hand, the prosecuting attorney looked at that and thought, man, there's a gold mine there to be had. And so we need to make this case look as bad as possible.
Yeah, and unfortunately, those types of cases quickly accelerate from the civil courts into the criminal courts, in which case it's not only a matter of money that's at stake, but it's liberty. And it's a matter of how it's affecting your family and your livelihood and everything else. And I know that at times, for many of the people with whom I have worked in the past and I've personally experienced, it feels like your life can be spinning out of control and other people are pulling the strings, and it's very hard to find your footing. What strategies did you use to start finding strength or rebuilding strength as you were going through this process?
Well, I'm fortunate to have a tremendous support network, my family in particular, and I have lots of peers in the industry that I was in that I could lean on for support. But one of the things that I did to help as a distraction and kind of bring some peace in my life, and if that was even possible at the time, was I decided to pick up a camera and start a photography business. Mm-hmm. And that led me into things that I really love, like the great outdoors and a lot of solitude. And I love the national parks. And I built a nice business in photography. And then came along the criminal indictment.
Mm-hmm. And how long did this entire process take, from going from the civil courts into the criminal courts into the situation where you are right now, where you're getting very close to surrendering to federal prison?
It started. I started sensing that there was some undercurrent back in 2007. So it's been about 10 years, but 6 years in particular was brutal. The last 6 years because that's when all the indictment and the subpoenas were submitted.
Well, if you can look back right now over that 10-year period from when it all began to crumble, or you look back in the 6 years when it escalated into the criminal justice portion of the journey, if you can look back right now, how many things do you think you would have done differently with the knowledge that you now have?
Oh, I would have done a lot of things differently. First of all, I would have changed our capital structure. At that time, we were an employee-owned company, which is really a pension plan that's highly regulated by the Department of Labor. So I would have made an effort with our board to try to mitigate or eliminate the ESOP, employee stock ownership plan, because that placed a huge financial burden on us. Secondly, I probably would have considered leaving the company, even though while I was CEO and president, I was just an employee just like anyone else, and so I really didn't have any ownership or an obligation to stay. So probably should have considered looking elsewhere, because I knew that there potentially was some stormy clouds ahead.
Well, as what we're going to do here, what I'd like to do with you and what I've invited you to do, and I want our listeners and viewers to understand, is that George is somebody who has a unique insight. He's an individual who not only built a company from relatively low sales to a behemoth in its industry, he was not only a leader of his industry, he also is somebody who has had the unfortunate experience of going through the criminal justice system. And through this series of interviews, what we're going to do is we're going to listen and learn from George as he talks to us about hiring an attorney, about choosing whether to plead guilty or go to trial, about what he learned from going to trial, about how he started to prepare himself after he found that a jury had convicted him on all counts, and he had to prepare himself for a sentencing in federal court. See, the reality is that 9 out of every 10 people who find themselves indicted by the federal government eventually face a sentencing hearing. And that certainly happened to George. Now he's getting ready to report to federal prison, and we're working on a plan so that he can come back and spread value to society. How much time are you facing, George?
60 months in federal prison camp.
So 5 years in federal prison. And yet that you can see from George, he still has his dignity. He still has his good spirits. And most importantly, he has a plan to serve that time in such a way that he can come back stronger. And I'm going to be working with him to document his journey, not only through prison, but also when he comes back to society and begins sharing this knowledge with other business owners so that they can avoid the unfortunate experience of going through the criminal justice system, or if they are targeted, make the best decisions that will put them on the pathway for the best possible outcome. George, I want to thank you for giving us this brief introduction, and we'll come back right away with another interview, and we're going to discuss, maybe we'll start with how to hire a defense attorney, what your experiences were, okay?
Sounds good. Thank you.
Okay, next episode on how to hire a defense attorney.